Germany, where sex work has been legal since 2002. Today, the country has about 28,000 sex workers and 2,000 businesses offering sexual services.
The fifth largest economy in the world. A government ranked among the most efficient on the planet. Germany is a country built on law, logic, and structure. Its reputation is one of discipline, organized systems, and structures that rarely crack. Yet, it's also where over 300,000 people sell sex.
But Germany is bucking that trend. Their tolerance towards legalized prostitution has fostered a booming sex industry, which employs as many as 400,000 prostitutes and draws sex tourists from all over Europe.
Where alcohol is legal at 16 and most brothels are licensed. It's ridiculous, it's bizarre, and it's completely permitted. Is this the model of modern control, or is this the most quietly sinful country in the world? Cannabis legalization and social clubs. In most countries, carrying 25 grams of cannabis would mean handcuffs, fines, or a court date. In Germany, it makes you an adult acting within the law. On April 1st, 2024, the country made recreational cannabis legal for everyone over 18. This was not a trial or a small city project. It was a nationwide law passed in parliament and signed by the government. The rules are simple. You can carry up to 25 grams in public, keep 50 grams at home, and even grow 3 plants for yourself. This is not the same as the medical dispensary system you find in many other countries. It is much more open. Cannabis is now part of everyday life in one of Europe's biggest and most powerful nations. And Germany pushed it further by creating something new: cannabis social clubs. These are small non-profit groups where up to 500 members can join together to grow, share, and use marijuana legally. Each member can receive up to 50 grams a month, and everything is tracked and recorded by the law. The clubs are not underground. They are registered with the government, run in private spaces like homes and gardens, and are closely monitored to stay within the rules. Germany has turned cannabis into something not hidden, not whispered about, but structured and visible. The goal, at least on paper, is to reduce the black market sales, weaken criminal networks, and give users safe and predictable access. But reality is so much more complicated. In some regions, the rollout feels like freedom. Berlin, for instance, has welcomed the reform. Clubs are opening quickly, and cannabis use is now visible in ways that once would have been unthinkable. In Bavaria, however, leaders are still enforcing some restrictions, banning public use, and blocking club formations in an attempt to preserve a stricter environment. In one part, a student shares a joint with friends inside a registered club. In another, police enforce new rules and expand surveillance around public gatherings. A nation once known for zero tolerance has built one of the most liberal drug frameworks in Europe. When you combine that with another popularized act long accepted into German law, their rules looks even stranger. Legalized sex work and regulation. Prostitution is spoken about in hushed tones in most countries. It is pushed into the back streets and treated as something shameful or forbidden. In Germany, it is not just legal, it is regulated, taxed, and even openly advertised. Prostitution is treated as an industry no different from any other that exists. Germany made prostitution legal across the country in 2002. Then in 2017, they introduced a tougher law called the Prostitute Protection Act. This law turned sex work into something official that the government now watches closely. Every sex worker has to register with the local authorities. They also have to go through health counseling and renew their registration every 2 years. If they're under 21, they must renew it every year and go through even more checks. Unlike in many countries where brothels are hidden or illegal, in Germany they're treated like regular businesses. They need a license, must follow building rules, and are checked often by inspectors. Advertising sexual services is allowed, but within strict limits. You can even find job listings for sex workers on normal job websites, with details about pay, hours, and what the job involves, just like any other job. By putting all of this into law, Germany didn't just stop punishing sex work, it made it a normal, accepted part of the system. Today, the country has one of the biggest legal sex industries in Europe. Around 300,000 people work in it, and it brings in over 14 billion euros every year. In cities like Cologne, Berlin, Hamburg, and Frankfurt, some areas are officially marked as red light districts. That means sex work happens openly and is protected by rules, not chased by police. People who work in this legal system aren't left completely on their own. Some are able to get health insurance. A few even qualify for pensions. In the city of Bonn, sex workers who work on the street have to pay for a permit each night before they start, using a machine, just like you would when paying for a parking ticket. Everything is tracked, everything is official, but just because it's legal doesn't mean it's safe. Since these laws were passed, many people have said the rules don't stop abuse. Trafficking still happens. Migrant women, especially those without legal papers, often get stuck in the system. They end up in brothels and massage parlors, working in conditions that don't match the clean, organized picture that's shown to the public. Many don't even register with the government. They're scared of being judged, exposed, or even deported. Even Germany's own government reports admit something important, that it's hard to tell who's working by choice and who's being forced. That truth is often hidden behind the paperwork. On the surface, Germany has one of the most modern, well-structured legal sex industries in the world. But in reality, it is far messier, revealing that law can normalize an industry without solving its darkest corners. And that balance between what is accepted publicly and what happens privately is not unique to sex work. In Germany, the human body is allowed its freedom, but the next example shows how that freedom looks when it moves from business to everyday culture. Free body culture. Going completely nude any other place in the world would be completely scandalous, but not in most places in Germany. It's a movement known as free body culture, and it goes far beyond beaches. This cultural attitude dates back to the late 19th century, but it exploded in the German Democratic Republic during the Cold War. There, nudity was seen as a symbol of equality and freedom in a tightly controlled state. There were no fashion labels, class markers, or hierarchy. By the 1970s and 80s, public nudity was so normalized in East Germany that entire families would vacation at FKK beach resorts. Photographs from the time show grandparents, toddlers, and young adults all completely nude, sitting on picnic blankets, reading newspapers, swimming, relaxing. Today, the free body culture is still everywhere. There are public saunas where full nudity is mandatory, urban parks where clothing is optional in marked areas, entire beaches, lakefronts, hiking paths, and wellness resorts dedicated to nudity, and fitness clubs where naked lounging between sauna rounds is not just permitted, it's expected. The Englischer Garten in Munich, one of the largest urban parks in the world, has allowed nude sunbathing since the early 1980s. In Berlin, FKK zones exist in public parks, with signs marking where clothes come off. In 2020, Berlin's public transportation system officially approved toplessness for women, aligning with equality laws. In 2022, a woman won a lawsuit after being thrown out of a public pool for going topless, and the city revised its dress code to allow it. It's not a fringe group that participates, it's everyone, from college students to young parents to middle-aged professionals. This culture cuts across age, gender, and class. While many tourists expect FKK zones to feel like a wild frontier, there are standards and etiquette, and most people don't cross it. But that doesn't mean the culture is less shocking. A country so defined by efficiency and modesty, yet also one where you can walk through a park and suddenly find yourself surrounded by naked strangers, completely unbothered. But nudity is only one layer of Germany's permissive system. When the sun goes down and the streets fill with music, the same spirit of freedom explodes into something far darker and much more harder to contain. Berlin clubs. There's nightlife, and then there's Berlin. In a lot of cities around the world, clubs open late and close early. In Berlin, some clubs open Friday night and stay open until Monday morning without ever shutting their doors. No closing time or lights-on warning, just continuous, pulsing, all-hours freedom. Germany, especially Berlin, isn't known for nightlife because it's flashy. It's known because it's limitless. And nowhere captures that more clearly than Berghain, the most infamous nightclub in Europe. Once a power plant, now a global techno institution, Berghain has no sign, no VIP section, and one of the strictest door policies in the world. Photos are banned. Phones are covered with stickers. What happens inside stays inside. The music is dark and heavy. The dress code is minimal, and in some rooms even optional. There are spaces for dancing, spaces for resting, and spaces where the boundaries between club, kink, and culture blur completely. And Berghain is just the most famous one. Kit Kat Club, for example, is openly described as a sex-positive venue known for its fetish nights, pool parties, and strict dress-down expectations. Within that system, people explore, without shame, without surveillance, and without censorship. This isn't hidden. These clubs are registered, licensed, and even protected under law. In 2021, Berlin officially reclassified nightclubs as cultural institutions, placing them in the same legal category as theaters and opera houses. The reasoning? Nightlife in Germany is considered part of the country's cultural heritage, which means the law itself recognizes what's happening in these spaces as art. While some come to dance, others come with the intention to cross lines, but everyone enters under the same agreement. What happens here is legal, and unlike countries that criminalize these spaces or drive them underground, Germany pulls them into the open, surrounds them with rules, and lets them operate in full view. But as wild as the clubs may be, they are only one stage. Because if you step outside into Germany's streets during festival season, you will find something even more extreme. Festivals of sin. Festivals are usually about tradition, music, or community. They give people a chance to celebrate, to dress up, to take a break from everyday life without crossing the line too far. In Germany, that line is the festival itself. The rules do not just bend, they collapse completely, and when behaviors that would be shocking anywhere else are celebrated, televised, and even blessed by local leaders. Carnival is a wild season festival that sweeps through cities like Cologne, Düsseldorf, and Mainz every winter. It is not just a weekend of fun, it is a fifth season, with its own laws and its own logic, a time when Germany collectively agrees to drop the mask of order. Parades fill the streets with floats carrying huge caricatures of politicians, their bodies stretched into grotesque shapes, their faces twisted into masks of ridicule. The costumes are limitless. Men dress as women, women as demons, and children toss confetti while clowns chug beer beside them. Teachers drink with students, mayors hand out shots, and the rules of everyday life are turned upside down in full public view. At the end, the people gather to burn a straw figure called the Nubble, blaming it for all the madness, as if to erase responsibility by placing it on an effigy. Then life resets, order returns, and everyone waits for the next year to lose control again. But Carnival is only the start. In September, Berlin hosts Folsom Europe, a festival that takes the spirit of release even further. For a weekend, entire streets in the Schöneberg district are closed to cars and turned into Europe's largest open-air BDSM parade. Attendees fill the streets in latex, leather, chains, and ropes. Some dress as pets, others as dominatrixes, and many wear nothing at all except body paint or harnesses. Stages host live kink performances, vendors sell gear openly, and techno music shakes the ground while tourists snap photos and locals applaud. What might be hidden in clubs elsewhere takes place here in the open, backed by the city's tourism board and defended as an expression of freedom. Even former Mayor Klaus-Michael once called Folsom just right for Berlin, a sign that the city does not just tolerate such scenes, it embraces them. Even the most innocent-sounding events can carry a streak of ridiculousness. In Ludwigsburg, the annual Pumpkin Festival looks like a family event at first, filled with food stalls and colorful displays. But the highlight is the Pumpkin Boat Regatta, where grown adults carve massive pumpkins, climb inside, and paddle them across a lake, often drunk, often in costume, and often sinking in front of roaring crowds. What begins as a weird tradition ends as a day of chaos that draws thousands of spectators every year. Whether it is parades filled with alcohol, leather-clad street festivals, or drunk men rowing pumpkins across water, German festivals are not only about release, they are about permission and freedom to wear vice openly, and to make sin itself part of the cultural calendar. But if festivals show how Germany gives people a stage for excess, the deeper question is, what happens when the costumes come off and the parties end? When these freedoms bleed into daily life, they collide with laws, culture, and morality in ways that create contradictions too large to ignore. The balance of sin. Step back from the details and a clear picture begins to form. Germany is not a place where vice hides. It is a country where the things most nations ban or stigmatize are brought into the open and absorbed into daily life. Cannabis is no longer a criminal substance, but a federally legalized drug managed through social clubs. Alcohol is not just legal at 16, but celebrated in public squares, at festivals, and on trains as part of long-standing tradition. Sex work is not whispered about, but registered, taxed, and counted in billions of euros. Public nudity, once taboo, is treated as a cultural norm, with saunas, parks, and beaches where clothing is simply unnecessary. Clubs operate for days without closing, some blending music with sexuality, all defended in law as cultural institutions. And festivals, whether it is Carnival or Folsom Europe, push this same idea to its most public extreme, turning excess into ritual and sin into spectacle. To outsiders, these freedoms put together can look like chaos. A teenager sipping beer in a plaza, an adult rolling a joint in a private apartment, a brothel openly listed online, or a crowd of people marching through Berlin in latex and chains. Each of these scenes seems sinful when viewed alone. Yet in Germany, each one is permitted, documented, and structured into the larger system. The government sets the rules, the public learns to live with them, and the cycle repeats until the unusual becomes ordinary. But the contradictions are impossible to ignore. Alcohol, responsible for more hospitalizations and accidents than cannabis, remains less regulated and more accepted. Legal sex work is meant to be safe, but still blurs into trafficking and exploitation. Nudity is normalized, yet still shocks visitors who cannot reconcile order with openness. And even cannabis clubs, built to shrink the black market, already face challenges from ghost associations, drug tourism, and enforcement gaps. In Germany, the law provides the framework, but culture decides how far it is stretched, and sometimes the distance between legality and morality is wider than anyone admits. When regulation turns vice into routine, does that make a country safer, freer, or simply more willing to blur the line between what is right and what is legal? Germany has proven that a nation can take behaviors long called sinful and integrate them into law. But legality does not always equal purity, and order does not always remove danger. In Germany, the most controversial acts aren't talked about silently. They're planned, documented, sometimes even televised. Prostitution doesn't hide in alleyways. It runs on permits, health checks, and taxable income. Beer isn't just for bars. It's on trains, in parks, and at breakfast. Public nudity isn't taboo. It's expected at lakes, saunas, and summer trails. Even hardcore kinks don't happen in the dark. They headline festivals, plaster billboards, and draw tourists from around the world. Freedom isn't just allowed, it's legislated. And what most countries call sin, they call structure. But sometimes, the line between structure and sun can be hard to see. Are these just cities with strong freedoms, or are they some of the most sinful places on earth?